Welcome to the SoCal Car Scene Podcast, the exclusive place for coverage of car culture in Southern California and the personalities that drive it. I'm your co-host, Big J Marash. Today on the show, we have podcaster Mark Greene. But before we get to that, I just want to remind you that the show is associated with SoCal Classic Car Storage, which provides South Orange County car lovers the opportunity to secure their vehicles in an environment made just for them. Our two facilities feature advanced security systems, 24-hour video surveillance, and a dedicated members lounge. In addition to storage, our expert sales staff offers consignment services for those looking to sell their cars. For more information, visit us at our Laguna Hills location or at SoCalCarStorage.com or on Facebook at Facebook.com/SoCalCarStorage. And take it away, Dean.
Thanks, Jay, and welcome everyone to the SoCal Car Scene Podcast. This is your host, Dean Marash, and we're super excited to have as our guest today the king of car podcast, California native Mark Greene. Mark hosts this incredibly successful Cars Yeah podcast 5 days a week with car influencers as guests from around the world. He's a self-proclaimed incurable automotive enthusiast who is as passionate about cars as he is his guests, which include artists, celebrities, journalists, authors, concours directors, racers, designers, builders, and more. Since 2014, Mark has hosted, believe it or not, over 1,500 Cars Yeah podcasts. Most recently, Mark launched a podcast called Buy, Sell, Hold with Keith Martin as his co-host, the publisher of Sports Car Market and American Collector Car Magazine, to name a few. They interview industry experts in the world of collector car investing. You'll find these two amazing shows on the Cars Yeah website, as well as Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Alexa TuneIn. Mark can also be found being the master of ceremony and keynote speaker for notable car shows around the country, such as the La Jolla Concours d'Elegance and Cruising for a Cure. Mark, thanks for joining us on the SoCal Car Scene Podcast.
Hey guys, great to be here. I'm honored to be on your podcast, and I think we're going to have some fun today.
That's great.
It's like podcast inception, a podcaster being interviewed on a podcast.
Yeah,
It's like
podcast squared.
Well, given the bizarro world we're living in right now with what's going on, this is it's like a topsy-turvy world. It's like when Superman flew backwards around the earth and got everything to rotate out of sync. So
I think we need Superman again.
Yeah, we need a couple of Supermans right now, for sure.
You know, the nice thing is we're at a safe distance from Mark. He's in lovely Gig Harbor, Washington, I believe, and we're down here in sunny SoCal and Laguna Hills. And so for those that need to know, this is a very safe and sanitary podcast.
Yeah, we're like 1,500 miles apart today. So I think we're safe and sound for sure. And up here in the state of Washington, we've been hit pretty hard with this virus deal. So my day is kind of the same. I'm always at home. I'm always recording shows. Now I'm not out at events and things, which all of us aren't attending right now. But for me, it's kind of same as it ever was, recording shows with people from all over the world. You've asked me to call in today. I've already recorded 5 shows today. I think I started in London, went to Florida, New York, Texas, and where did I end up? I think it was Los Angeles, the last one. Sometimes I lose track.
Amazing. That's incredible, Mark. You really are a global podcast trotter.
Well, thanks. It's fun. I get inspired every day.
Hey, is everybody okay? You and your family, everybody healthy up there so far?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. We're doing fine. My daughter lives up here. My son lives in San Francisco, and communicating with them every day. My wife here, of course, she's been laid off from work. She works at a school. So she's at home, but that's, part of the deal. I keep threatening to put her to work, maybe editing shows or something. And she just shuts the door and leaves and acts like she's not. Yeah,
Just
not
don't
here.
make her transcribe any of the interviews.
Yeah. But no, it's we're okay. I appreciate
Good.
you asking me. So far, so
Good.
good.
Yeah, Jay, what do you think? Do you recommend that? Well, you're in a father-son editing role with this podcast. Do you
Yeah.
recommend that, or do you recommend husband and wife? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh God.
Yeah. Could cause some
That,
problems, I have a
yeah,
feeling.
it could definitely cause some problems. No, I'm glad that you're not in my editing bay.
Yeah, I tell you something funny about that. Growing up, my wife, she was an engineer when we were first married, and we decided to have children, and we opted for her to leave her career and stay home and raise the kids, which was a financial challenge, but it was a huge benefit for everybody, including me. But I'd come home from work some nights and she'd say, Mark, you're not at work anymore. Take your box voice off. You're at home now. And I'm like, yeah. And I think one of her favorite words is, you're not the boss of me. So, yeah, I have to kind of modify my
But
behavior once in a
I'm
while.
sure she's still rehearsed and ready to go on that in case you do take her up on that editing thing.
Well, we'll see. I don't know if she really wants to listen to me any more than she already has to. But, I tell you, funny, working at home is bizarre because I kind of I commandeered the whole front of our house basically. And there was a passageway from where I work into the kitchen, which is her domain, and it didn't have a door. So last year she said, you know what? We need to put a door in here. So I had this very cool slab door made out of a giant piece of mahogany with this German engineering. It's one of those doors where it rides on a railing, slides
Oh yeah,
back
I
and
know
forth.
exactly
Yeah,
what you're talking about. Those are cool.
really, yeah, most expensive door on the planet. I can't believe what I spent on this thing, but it's just cool looking. But many times I'll look over and I'll see the door sliding, and I won't even see her. She'll be on the other side, and I'll just see this hand come through that like says waves goodbye. So yeah,
That's classic.
yeah.
So, Mark, one of the reasons why we've asked you to be a guest, other than the fact that you're one of the most prolific podcasters in the car scene, if not the most in the world, is that you grew up and you're a native California guy.
Yeah, I grew up down in
In
California in La
particular,
Jolla.
was it La Jolla that you
Yeah.
grew up in, north of
Yeah.
San Diego? How did
Yeah.
how did that shape your involvement in this car scene?
Oh, it was huge. Absolutely huge because Southern California, of course, where you guys are and is the car scene. And I was very fortunate. I grew up in La Jolla. It's a very nice part of San Diego, affluent neighborhood. And my dad worked his tail off to enable us to be able to live there. My mom as well. But as a result, I was surrounded by really cool cars. In fact, one of the stories I always share on my Cars Yeah podcast is my next door neighbor, Mr. Swanser. He was an FBI agent. So
Oh,
that's
cool.
just cool. That's just cool, right? And he was a
Right.
bachelor, makes him even more cool. And he bought in 1974 one of the first 450 SLs that was sold at Heinz Geet's Mercedes Benz in La Jolla, very cool dealership there. And he brought it home, 450 SL. And I walked over and I said, man, this is so cool because I'd never seen one, first one in town. And I asked him if I could wash it sometime for him. And he said, well, yeah, sure. So the next weekend I went over. I was only 14, so he let me back it out of his driveway and drive it over to my house. I thought that was pretty nice of him.
It
And I
was.
spent all day on that car. And at the end of the day, I took it back and he walked out and he said, man, this looks better than the day I bought it. And I said, well, thank you. And I started to leave. And he said, well, wait a minute. How much do I owe you? And I said, you're going to pay me? Well, I thought he was just like letting me do his car. And he said, well, of course, I didn't expect you to detail my car for free. Well, I came home with 25 bucks in my pocket. Now, this is 1974. A kid who's 14 who had a paper route. I made like 60 bucks a month doing my paper route, getting up at 4:30 every morning, riding my bicycle all over the neighborhood, throwing papers. And my dad said, you really look like you liked that. Why don't you start your own business? So we made up some flyers and my dad mimeographed them and I took them, put them in my papers, and a business was born that literally took me through junior high, high school, and into college, and actually helped me save money when I got married to buy my first
Incredible.
home. Yeah. And it
Wow.
all started with that 450 SL. But I tell you what I would do, guys. I would get on my bike and I'd ride into La Jolla, into town, and I had these little cards I made that said it was called Auto Care. And it was a drawing my dad helped me do of a Porsche Turbo, which I now have that same Porsche Turbo today.
Oh, is
Although,
that orange one that you have, Mark?
yeah. And I would put my card on people's windshields, and I would only pick cars I like Porsches and Mercedes and Rolls Royce. And there was a lot of great cars in La Jolla because it's a city that's pretty affluent. And it was awesome. I was self employed. I loved what I was doing. I got to drive all sorts of cool cars. So, yeah, it was Southern California that launched that. And if you fast forward to a career that I was involved in for 20 plus years, Griot's Garage Car Care Company, I was president of that company and helped develop the car care line that they had. And I did all the marketing and graphics and merchandising and a lot of other things there. It's funny how it all came back around to that detailing in my brain
Interesting.
that
Now,
I ended up, making all those products.
hey, was your father a big motorhead? I mean, my dad was so into cars. We spent almost all weekend long wrenching and
hmm
bang and chasing down parts at the junkyard. That's how I grew up. But how big was your dad into this car scene?
Well, my dad was never a mechanical guy. He was an architect. He was a creative guy. It taught me a lot of valuable things. He grew up on a farm in Texas, a little town in northern Texas. So he had an incredible work ethic. But he did like cars early on. And when I was 5 years old, he bought a 1949 MGTC. Now, that car was incredible to me because as a little boy, it was a small car, so you felt kind of big in it. The doors, the way they're designed, they cut down from the front of the door to the back very low. So even if you're little, you can put your arm on the door. Whereas
Right.
now, if you're 5 years old, you can't reach the top of a door with your arm. And it was right-hand drive, which was bizarre. And he had a spare steering wheel that he used to let me carry in the car, and we'd pull up next to people, and I'd pretend like I was driving, and people would go, "What the heck's going on with that little guy?" And so that really started it for me. He had friends who had cars. I had an Aunt Ginny that had a '57 T-Bird. We'd go over to her house, and I'd get rides in that thing. In fact, we used to go camping down in Mexico, and she had a Myers Manx
Nice.
dune buggy that she let me drive. We snuck off down the beach and let me drive. And we had little motorcycles, Honda Trail 70s and 125 Yamahas and stuff. So yeah, that whole car culture. And of course I was big into surfing, skateboarding, bicycles back then that you would modify with sissy bars and banana
Right.
seats and ape hanger
I don't,
handlebars, I should say.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you've seen the picture in my facility, but I took my original Stingray. It's a green one with 5 speed, with
Yeah.
the fantasy and all that. I gave it to my painter, Max, over South County Auto Body, and he totally restored it.
Oh, cool.
The new, so it's sitting here in our lounge, and it just takes me right back to delivering papers. And
Yeah.
I delivered the Oakland Tribune, like you probably delivered the Tacoma News or something.
Well, it was the San Diego Union.
San
The
Diego Union. You were
The
still in
Union.
South.
Yeah, or wait, what? San Diego News Tribune, I think it was, but it was the morning paper. They had an afternoon paper. In fact, Kroc, the guy, his wife Joan Kroc, I think their son was the guy. He was, of course, Kroc was the guy with McDonald's, but they owned the newspaper. So yeah, it was. Now, was your bike originally green?
Yes, he painted it almost identical to the color that it was, kind of a metal, kind of a sparkly green, typical of the time. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, it wasn't a Schwinn. I think it came from Sears, and,
Okay.
because when you couldn't afford the real deal Schwinn or the expensive bike, your parents would go shopping at Sears back in the day.
Oh yeah.
And so I was just, I don't know, I must have paid for at least half of it, or I can't remember the details, but wow, that, but I think these are the formative steps in your early life that get you hooked on cars. Maybe it starts with matchboxes or
Oh yeah.
other things earlier on, but you get into bikes, and then next thing it's other people's cars, like your dad or your brothers. And my brother had really cool bitching cars too. I remember I was always envious of him. But so what is it about Southern California that makes it so unique? I mean, now that you're somewhere else, you're in the great Northwest, which is not a bad place to go because Gig Harbor is really cool.
Yeah.
What is it about SoCal?
Well, I think number one, West Coast, there was a lot of things that were happening. When you think back to the 60s or 50s or 40, I mean, that's where hot rodding really got its foothold. Now, there was plenty of people on the East Coast doing it too, but when you think about hot rods and all the hot rod shops in the 50s, even the 40s going back, and you think of someone like Rod Emery and his father and then his grandfather who started building hot rods out of drop tanks from World War II aircraft, it was the innovation. And after World War II, all those guys came back with all these skill sets, welding and riveting and fabricating. And they wanted to kind of sow their oats, I think, and, go out there and do something wild. They just come back and survived a war. And it launched that whole thing. And of course, you think about the Beach Boys and surfing and all those trends that really started in Southern California, outdoor lifestyle. I think it was a trend setting place in the country, and all those things kind of traveled across the country. Again, I know West Coast guys, some of those guys say, well, hey, we did that too. But California has always had that allure, that concept of hanging on the beach and blonde hair and girls in bikinis everywhere. And, it's just the way it was. But I tell you, when I moved up here 26 years ago, I really thought I'd left Car Central. I was really kind of bummed a bit. And I started meeting people up here through clubs and realized there's a huge number of people up here that are into cars. And with the big tech industries up here, Microsoft and later Starbucks and some of the other biggies, Boeing and so forth, there's some money up here. So there are a lot of car people up here. It's now the wintertime with the rain, it kind of stifles things a bit. And I've had to kind of adjust to that a little bit over the last 26 years. But there's a lot of incredible collections up here for sure.
Hey, so let's talk a little bit about the Great Northwest. Now, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, Mark, but correct me, Griot's got its start up in Tacoma in that area, if I'm not mistaken, or at least their first big facility. And of course, you're blessed. You get to live in this gorgeous city of Gig Harbor, where I used to summer with my family. And of course, Jason used to hang out with us there at Horsehead Bay too. Beautiful country. So take us back to the beginning of this company and when you got involved, and then how did you wind up becoming kind of the head of the operation as the president?
Sure. Well, I was working. I went to college in Southern California, met my wife, who was an engineering student, and I studied graphic design and advertising and business. And my first job out of college was working for a small ad company. And about 6 months in, I went to my boss and I said, hey, how do I make more money? And he said, well, you can bring in work. You can be an account executive. And so 2 days a week, I would put a suit on. I would drive downtown San Diego, go into these high rises. This is before computers, way back in the 80s. And I would try to land accounts. And then 3 days a week, I would be a creative director because I like doing the creative side. So I did both. And I was there for 11 years. And one of the accounts I landed, because we were doing a lot of catalog work, was this startup company called Griot's Garage. And so I called Richard Griot and I said, hey, we'd like to design your catalog. And he said, I've already got somebody to buy. And I think it took me seriously, pretty much hung up on me.
Hung up on you.
And it took me about 8 phone calls. And what I finally did was I said, hey, I would like to come up there. I'm not going to pitch you. I want to come up and buy some of your stuff. Because I was actually mailed the very first Griot's Garage catalog. On the cover was a white 72 911S that Richard owned at the time, which eventually became my car. And so years later, so I went up there and I was driving an 84 Porsche Cabriolet at the time, a Carrera, a wonderful car. It was in a platinum color with chocolate brown interior, chocolate brown top. In fact, I once went it was my daily driver. I once went 300 days without putting the top up. Driving it to work every day. Yeah, that's SoCal for you, right? No rain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I couldn't do that here. So, any rate, I went up to see him and ended up convincing him to give us a try. Long story short, he started using us. We became friends, and then he actually approached me about coming on board and joining the company. And he said, "Well, if you owned a part of this business, would you come on board? And I'd like you to head up the marketing and merchandising and." In a small company, you wear every hat there is. That's why I have no hair left. I wore all the hats, rubbed all my hair off. So I left the company I was with and joined him. There was literally only 4 of us, I believe. There was Richard, myself, another guy who did operations, a friend of his family's. a secretary who answered the phones, and then this kid would stop by in the afternoon on his way home from school and pack up the orders that we took that day. And so, if you fast forward a few years, Richard decided he wanted to move up to the Northwest. His family lives up here, even though he grew up in Pacific Palisades. His father had sold his business and took over another family business, a big trucking company. And they lived up in the San Juan Islands. So I said, I don't want to move to the Northwest. It rains up there. And my car is a convertible. The top's not very waterproof on those old Porsches, and it leaks. And I didn't want to leave Southern California. But I saw that there was an opportunity there, and I liked the idea of creating something somewhat from scratch and building it. So we moved up here. My wife quit her career as an engineer and became a stay-at-home mom. My daughter was 5 and my son was 4 months old. And we moved up here and started building Griot's Garage, and it started as a direct mail catalog business. From there, it evolved, and we were selling some car care. There was only 4 items, actually, car care items, but mostly high-end professional stuff for the garage, tools and things. And then we just grew it. So I was with the company 20 plus years. The last 5 or 6 years, I was the president of the company, running things. But I primarily was responsible all those years for all the marketing, the merchandising, branding. I wrote copy. I took pictures. I designed layouts. I designed bottles. I came up with custom products to brand. I traveled the world looking for products. So it was a really fun ride. During that time, I raced vintage cars for 12 years, and it was cool. I got to play in the car world, be creative, be a business person, run an operation, and understand all the facets of a direct mail catalog. And then, of course, online came along, and we created a website and had to do that, and had a call center. And then when after about I think it was 15 years, Richard bought an old Coca-Cola bottling building that was really dilapidated. He took me over there and he said, "What do you think? We could make this in our corporate headquarters." I looked at him and I said, "This is like finding the crummiest old car in a barn full of chickens and trying to restore it." And that's what we did. So that building, I got put in charge of designing everything that encompassed that facility. It had a car care center. It had a retail store. It had offices. It had Richard's area where he restored and kept his cars. It had an event center and a Concours lawn. So I got to put on my architectural creative hat because my dad was an architect and design that building. And it really, really turned out cool. So it was a fun ride. I got to do a lot of really cool things.
So Mark, it really segues nicely into here we have a gentleman. That's you, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you're okay with that title.
Yeah, I was about to hang up, but no.
Yeah, right. Oh, wait a minute, you got the wrong guy.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah.
So here you are, uber successful for 20 plus years in the car care business. You took it from nothing to an incredible influence,
and I had a great team around me too. I don't want to dismiss all the help I had, for sure.
Oh, I'm sure it was a great team and very successful. Everybody's familiar with great products that you have there. But how do you segue from that into podcasting in 2014? I mean, it seems like one of those jam on the brakes, Brody, and then turn right kind of thing. You saw some shiny object, or what happened?
No, my wife became very ill, and she had a tumor in her leg that was basically eating up her tibia in her leg. And she needed major surgery and long months of rehabilitation where she literally couldn't walk. At the same time, my father, who was 80 at the time, fell and broke his neck, and he was in very dire straits. And then my wife's mother was diagnosed with cancer.
All three at the same time.
Oh gosh, it's one of those things in life where you look to the heavens and go, "Why are you testing me like this?
Right.
What did I do?" And so I decided, you know what, it was time for a change. I kind of felt that it was becoming a time for a change anyway. And as my wife said, you've helped build 2 great businesses. The advertising company I was with, I helped grow that tenfold. Griot, same thing. She goes, "Maybe it's time for you to build your own thing." And so I said, okay, well, I decided I didn't decide. I kind of said I need to stay home and care for my wife while she recovered, because again, it was months and months of recovery. And so my son was in college. And so for the first time in my life, I didn't have an income. So I was freaking out. and he was in a very expensive East Coast school, private college. And he came home the first summer from school, and I was really kind of like, what am I going to do? I need to find something. And some headhunters had called me about working at companies, but none of those roles seemed interesting at all. I almost took one job, and my wife said, I don't think you're very excited about this. And I said, no, but it's income. She goes, well, why would you go do something you're not excited about?
Well,
Don't,
yeah, maybe
yeah.
she's right. You could have told your son he's going to go to a state school instead of those expensive.
No, that wasn't going to happen. Not no. Well,
No.
that's me. I just, I told both my kids, I'm going to pay for your college. I want you to go have a good experience, because my college, I had to pay for my own college, and I worked all the time. I never went to one party in 4 years of college. I worked all the time to be able to pay to go to school, and I wanted my kids to have a little different. Not that I wanted them to party. I told them, but I
You
wanted
did.
them to have a different experience where they could focus on finding what their passion in life was without the stress of having to earn money. Now they had to have summer jobs, and they had to pay for some of their own expenses and things. But the school costs, which is, we could talk for hours about
Right.
my opinion of how colleges have escalated their prices to ad nauseum prices. But I wanted them to go to the best schools they could and have a great experience. So my son was home, and we were going for a walk, and I said, Blake, mostly the son asked the father this question: what should I do with my life? I'm going to ask you, what should I do with my life?
Did you really?
I did. Yeah. And he looked
Wow.
at me and he said, Dad, you've been taking me to Pebble Beach since I was 4 years old. My son's been to Pebble Beach 18 years. I've been 31 years in a row. He said, when you race cars, I was your pit crew. You took me to all the vintage races. You took me to all the car shows. What's the one thing I tease you about? You can't walk past a car without stopping and asking the owner about the car, and you eventually start asking him or her about their business, because I love business. I love private business, entrepreneurship. And I said, okay. And he said, why don't you do that? And I said, so people pay somebody to go to car shows and talk to people? And what's that job? I've never heard of that job before. And he said, no. He said, have you ever heard of a thing called a podcast? Now, this was 6 years ago.
Had you heard of it?
No, I didn't know what he was talking about. And I said, what's a podcast? And he goes, come on, Dad, you're so old. And so he explained to
course.
me, that he'd been listening to podcasts when he's in college, and he's learning all these cool things. And and he goes, there's this new thing coming along. And he said, why don't you do a podcast where you talk to people about their cars and their careers and their businesses? And I kind of laughed it off and came home, and it kept kind of, an idea kind of chews away your brain a little bit, and it's like a car you see that you really want to buy, and it won't go away no matter how much you try to suppress it.
Somehow you're going to have to rationalize this.
Yeah. So
Right.
what I did was, look, I was at home having to care for my wife. I was having to carry her to the bathroom, bathe her, cook. Our whole world had become upside down, because Jill, when she took over being at home, she took over being at home. That was her domain. I didn't even have to go in the kitchen. We had a deal that I would never touch the laundry, as long as I kept her car clean. And so I worked 10, 11 hours a day. I was gone a lot. I traveled a lot. I'd work weekends. I'd go to car shows. I was racing. And so now I was in charge of the house, and I was home. So there was some downtime. So I started investigating this thing called podcasting. I started calling podcasters. Hey, like, how do you make money, and how do you do this, and where can I learn about this? And I eventually connected with a guy named John Lee Dumas, who has a very successful podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire. He helped me quite a bit get started. He has a podcast group that he's put together where you can join them and learn how to do podcasting. And then I went to YouTube and I learned how to build a website. I built my own website by watching YouTube videos. I learned how to record in Adobe Audition, watching YouTube videos. I wrote a whole intensive business plan. I had a 3-page document on my avatar. Who would my listener be? I mean, I really took this over. And within 3 months, I was ready to launch. And even the name, Cars Yeah, I was having a really hard time coming up with the name. And one night, my wife and I were watching a commercial for hotels.com. And the
Great ad.
campaign the campaign they were doing was hotels.com, hotels.com.
Oh,
And I went, yeah. And she looked at me and she said, cars, yeah. Because try to find a URL that has the word cars in it that's not already taken.
right.
It's,
But definitely not. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely not in a lot of you.
so I ran to my computer and went on to Bluehost, I think it was, and typed in cars, yeah, and nobody had taken it. So I grabbed carsyeah.com, .net, everything, and Cars Yeah was born. So
Wow.
I wrote up my whole script, how everything was going to work. I practiced interviews with friends of mine. And then I put a whole thing. I had never even done social media. I didn't even have a Facebook page. And so I created a Facebook page, Cars Yeah Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. I mean, all this stuff. I'm all ready to go. And I said, I'm going to launch on May 28th, which was 1 year after I left Grillo's Garage. That was a kind of a departure date for me. And I wanted to make that date have meaning for the launch. Well, I was 2 weeks away. I'd been putting notices out there. And this gal calls me. Her name's Cindy Meidel. She's a PR gal who works in the
I know her.
automotive. Yeah. And she
She's
said,
awesome.
yeah. And I knew her from before. And she said, Mark, who's your first guest? And I said, I have no idea. I haven't found anybody yet. And, I've called all these people, but they're like, well, you've never done this before. I don't know if I want to be your first guest. Your beta cars. Yeah. And so she said, well, I have this guy who would like to be your first guest. His name's Rick Cole. And I said, Rick Cole, the guy that started auctions at Pebble? And she said, yeah, he wants to be your first guest. And so it was 4 days before my official public launch. She called me and she said, okay, he can do it today, but he's at the airport. He's about to fly overseas and he'll be gone for a week or two. So I recorded his show while he was at the airport. We kept hearing the background, flight number 57 is boarding now. And we'd have to stop and wait. But we recorded that show and that was the beginning. And then I just got on the phone like a salesman and just started calling everybody. And I knew a lot of people in the industry, and a lot of very nice people who were friends of mine took a risk with me and said, I'll be on your show. A lot of them that I'd never met before, like Sam Amello, who, had Two Guys Garage. He offered to be on my show. So my first 100 shows were people that were just nice and gracious and took a chance with me. But that's the right turn you talk about.
That's a hard right turn, but it's quite a story. I mean, to me, we had the pleasure, or I had the pleasure of being your guest on Cars Yeah way back, and I think it was
guest number 926.
926. That's right.
Yeah.
And at the time, Mark, I remember being so impressed how buttoned up you were.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I was thinking he's on his way to 1,000 of these, and I couldn't believe that number. But now since then you've surpassed 1,500.
Yeah.
I mean, in your wildest imagination, did you ever think that Cars Yeah would turn into this Cars podcast juggernaut? I mean, really?
No, I didn't. And last year I launched a television show as well. I did 13 episodes of Cars Yeah TV. We were on MAV TV and we were streamed on Lucas Oil Racing. That whole venture was just really weird and bizarre and odd. And the fact that it even happened. TV is a whole nother bizarro land. If you talk about bizarro lands, we're trying to make season 2 happen. Very, very challenging because it's very expensive to shoot it. And I opted to do it the hard way. I decided that I wanted to own my own show instead of, because I'd been approached by Discovery back when it was Velocity to do a show. But the kind of deal that they wanted to do, it didn't make any sense to me. And
No.
I talked to Wayne Carini, who's been a guest on my show and become a friend of mine. And I said, Wayne, this TV stuff, what am I about to step into here? And he just kind of laughed and he said, it's very different. He said, the best advice I can give you, and he gave me a lot of great advice, was to figure out a way to do it where you own your own show. It's a very expensive way to do it. It's very challenging. I pulled it off. We did 13 episodes. We're trying to get season 2 done, but the TV industry is changing so fast right now that everything is different almost every month. And so I don't know. I can't promise that season 2 will ever happen, but I can say I did 13 episodes. We've actually already shot half of season 2. I've got it ready to go, but I'm doing it a different way, and it's complicated, and I won't bore anybody with that story now, but hopefully I can come back because I really liked doing it. It was fun. It was like the podcast, but I actually got to go to people's businesses and open the garage door, if you will, behind the curtain and show people what the inner workings of these companies are. It'd be like if I did a show with you and came up and, showed people what's it like to have a business like Jay and Dean have. How does it work? What do they do? What is the environment like? And we all know there's plenty of eye candy at a place like yours for people
Yeah,
to
right.
enjoy. Yeah.
Well, Jay, you and I have threatened to launch
It's all fighting and it's all fighting and throwing chairs.
Yeah, it's Orange County choppers all over again.
We make it
Broken glass.
we make it look romantic, but Jason and I, we have our own little timeout corners and stuff like that.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
It
You
works.
got to. But, the thing I learned about this TV world is, and I think most people know it now, but maybe back then they didn't, that so much of this stuff is just, it's either ad lib or it's scripted.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and the craziness is all fake. It's all built into it,
Yep.
because otherwise it might get a little boring. And I wasn't interested in that. I really wanted to take people inside people's companies. So we'll see. I'm hoping that we can bring it back.
Well, good luck. Jason had a pseudo celebrity in the other day that he was selling a car to. I'll let Jason tell that story. But he's on television as well. And I was asking him about the drama. And he was telling me that as they're filming it, they'll tell him, to amp it up, tone it down as far as the drama is concerned as they're filming it. And I thought, wow, that's interesting.
Well, it's TV. And, if you look at super successful reality TV, let's take one that I'm so fond of, the Kardashians, not.
I see you watching that.
But, well, I tell you what I am impressed by is the fact that they've done what they've done, which is insanely impressive to me. Not a show I have any interest in at all. But the fact that they pulled it off. But again, I didn't want to do that fake stuff. And I've heard of some TV folks that they finally get fed up with it and they say, we're not going to do this anymore because you watch some of those build shows and you see these guys act the way they do. And you think, I would never take my car to that shop. I mean, these guys aren't professional. They're not real. There's no way you can paint and build a car in 1 week. You can't do it. I mean, you can't even prep a car in a week to lay paint on it properly. So, but I think people by now get it. So it's just entertainment and so forth. I wanted to do something different, and maybe that's why it's not on anymore. But I don't know. It's an interesting world, that's for sure.
So, but Mark, as it relates to podcasting, I mean, you've inspired a lot of other people. You talked to, mentioned a few people already that are starting some podcasts. You certainly influenced myself and Jay as we've started our podcast.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way.
Car Scene. We're so pumped up. We're having a lot of fun telling other people's stories.
Yeah,
it's just great. How does it feel to inspire others and in this arena?
Well, it feels awesome, and I'll tell you what. When as I told that story about planning, I'm a planner. So when I wrote the whole business plan for what I'm doing, it was way overkill. It was kind of silly. So many people just say, why are you spending all this time? Just start, just do it. But I wanted to understand the why. And to me, the word why is extremely important. It's if you understand the why in your life, why you do anything, why you take drugs, why you eat too much, why you exercise, why you love cars, why? Well, if you go back and watch a wonderful TED Talk by Simon Sinek, he talks about the why in your life. So I really dove into the why, and that led me to my mantra, which I decided I needed to create the why mantra. And for me, it's 3 words: inspiring, automotive, enthusiast. And my goal with this whole thing was to support and help others by telling their stories of inspiring automotive enthusiasts. So together we could inspire automotive enthusiasts that they can go out in their life and have fun doing what they do every day, just like I'm doing, like you and Jay are doing. And Part of it goes back to a time at Griot's. I used to stay late. Well, I stayed late every night, but I used to stay really late on Thursdays and do what I call boys' night out. And I would invite friends to come. And I would say, hey, we've got these new car care products. I want you guys to test this stuff on your cars and tell me the experience you're having. Well, one of my friends, who I used to race vintage cars with, he's a neurosurgeon. He was with me one night. We were working late. We were the only two there. And he said, man, I wish I could do what you do all the time. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I wish I could do this for a living, like work around cars. And I said, Bill, you're a pediatric neurosurgeon. You save people's lives. I mean, I put you on a pedestal that's like so high up there. And he said, well, don't get me wrong. I like my career. I love what I do. It brings me great things. But he said, I can't wait to the day I can just retire and be in my garage and play with my cars. And you get to do this all the time. And I've never forgotten it. And this was literally 10, 15 years ago. And I'm still talking about it today. I know so many people who are very successful financially, or maybe moderately successful, or whatever layer that might be, but they really aren't doing what they love. They are just going through the motions. You get married, you have kids, and you have a career, and you feel like, okay, I can't change. I'm so locked in now. I have a mortgage and car payments. My kids are going to be going to college, and my wife wants to stay home, and she likes shoes and purses and jewelry and all
Those are
this
those
stuff.
are those are almost as expensive as Porsches.
Almost. And or you're in this trap where you have all these nice things and you don't want to abandon those. Well, my goal was to focus on that and help people realize that there are all these opportunities in the automotive sector and industry that you can create careers from. And I'll tell you a wonderful success story. There's a gentleman named Ramsey Potts who works for Sotheby's. And Ramsey is a guy who worked in a successful career. He was making good money, but he wasn't happy. And one morning, his wife said to him, you need to go find something you love because this job is just eating you up. We can cut back, we can move to a smaller house, whatever it takes, but I just can't see you going in every day and just doing what you hate just so that we can have all these things in
What a
our
great
lives.
spouse. Wow.
And yeah, and so he had been listening to me for quite a while, and his wife said, "Why don't you do what Mark says? Go find a job in the car industry." Well, let's fast forward. I'm on the lawn at Pebble. Ramsey is a very wonderful guy, outgoing. You'll know him when you see him. He's always dressed to the nines. He wears this nice, dapper little hat. He's got this huge smile. He's so gregarious and outgoing. And I'm walking on the lawn at Pebble, and I hear this guy go, Mark Greene. I turn around and I'm going, who said that? And this guy comes up. I'm not very tall, but he's tall. And I look up at him and he goes, can I give you a hug? And I said, why do you want to hug me? and he said, because you changed my life. And he told me the story. And that elevated me to a height like I can't tell you. And since then, I've heard that story over and over from people who've listened to my show. So I'm doing what I set out to do, and that is inspire other people that there is a way, like you guys have figured out, to have a career around your passion and do well and enjoy life. Because here we are sitting in the middle of a horrific virus epidemic that's killing people. And I realize people die every day from lots of things, but that's my point. You don't know how much time you have left. My friend, the neurosurgeon, I asked him one time, what have you learned after all these years of saving people's lives? And he said, well, I've learned that life is very fragile and we don't know that the day we wake up might be our last. He said, I've had people on my operating table that got up, thought their life was going to be normal for the next 40, 50 years. They trip on a curb, hit their head, and they're about to die. Yeah. And so he said, that's what this has taught me, that life is fragile and you need to value it. These are all cliches, but they're really true. And so,
Well, Jason, poor Jay, he has to listen to all my old sayings from my mother, my father, mine that I made up. And but my point to him is always with these old sayings is
yeah,
they're so incredibly true when you think about them. But when you're young, they annoy the crap out of them because you hear them. I mean, they don't really ring true.
Yeah.
But the older you get, the more you say, time is so precious and you don't know when what day is going to be your last. So I think you're right. This COVID-19 experience has brought many people, and not just the car community, but in the world and certainly in the United States,
Yeah.
back together again in a way that I don't think anything else could, because it's a reminder that, all of us are vulnerable,
Mhm.
uh, to our last day.
Well, time, I've always said this, and my kids, they can repeat it because they've heard it ad nauseum. They've had to put up with all my dadisms over the years. Is
Dadism.
is
Love it.
time is our most valuable asset. And I had somebody once tell me this. It's funny, and this is appropriate for what's going on right now. He said, "Time is like toilet paper. The closer you get to the bottom of the roll, the faster it rotates, and the more anxious you get because you know the end is near." And
That's
in
great.
given our toilet paper craziness that has gone on here with this whole thing, but you're right. And honestly, last year I lost 8 past guests,
No
meaning
kidding.
8 people
Oh,
who had been on my show passed away. This year there's already been 3.
wow.
None to this virus yet, although I'm just now starting to see numerous people every day losing somebody due to
Mm,
this on my
wow.
social, because I'm active on social media. So I see all
Right.
these people. I don't really know them, but they're followers of Cars Yeah podcasts. And so it's true. So you know what? There are so many opportunities in the car industry, things that I never thought about that you can do in this industry and have fun and make an impact on others. And so, and here's the
Well,
bottom line. This was a very long-winded answer to your original comment, and that is the concept of giving back. If there's one thing, and I do a lot of keynote speeches, I'm invited to car clubs and concours events, banquet dinners to do keynotes. And one of the ones I give is giving away the secret to happiness in life. And so that is, we as human beings, and I'll give it away right now without the whole speech. We as human beings are truly happiest when we give back to others, whether we realize it or not. And
well said.
when you can figure out a way in life to give back to others, even if it's a part of your life, it might be donating a little time to people, or your whole career is donated to giving back and helping others, you will learn that you're happiest. And I've learned this after interviewing. Well, this morning I did my 1531st interview. It, it's a
Amazing.
repeated message that I hear from people over and over, that when they finally figure that out in their life, some figure it out young, some it takes their whole life to figure it out. But when they finally figure that out, they realize what really makes them happy. It's not
Yeah, yeah,
accumulating wealth. It's not accumulating, although wealth can provide you with the opportunity and time to give back. So I have nothing against accumulating wealth, but you have to realize too, if you just accumulate wealth to have things in your life, and I'm a big thing guy. I love cars. I love memorabilia, all this stuff, but that is not how you get happy.
right.
It's helping other people for
Hey,
sure.
Mark, before we run out of time today, that was great. And I think it's timely. I'm glad we had that conversation because
Yeah. Thank
top of
you.
mind, it's frontal lobe stuff for everybody, not just the car community. But recently, speaking of podcasts, you joined forces with the one and only Keith
Oh yeah.
Martin, the publisher of
Yeah.
American Car Collector, to produce this Buy, Hold, and Sell, if I got it right, podcast. Tell us about the inspiration behind that one. And by the way, I mean, Jay and I love it. I mean, it's just what a great idea. And time permitting, Jay will tell you about the game we play with Car Collector Magazine.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you for asking me about that, because this is something fun. You sit here with your business and you try to figure out a way to scale. With you guys, there's different ways you scale business: storage, selling, buying, all different ways. I had pitched Keith Martin. I'd known Keith for years. Sports Car Market Magazine, American Car Collector Magazine. I mean, he's. I used to subscribe to 40 magazines, car magazines. I'm down to about 6, and his is one that I won't not subscribe to, because I just love it. I love all the articles. I love seeing where the market reports are. I pitched him over a year ago the idea of producing a podcast for Sports Car Market. And he said, this is kind of interesting. What would it be? And we talked a little bit, and then he kind of drifted off, and I'd have to kind of reel him back in, put my salesman hat on and say, I think we could do something really fun. Well, then he had his tragic stroke. And so he was paralyzed on the left side of his body, very serious health situation. And he's spent, over a year now, Rick, because his stroke anniversary was last January 4th. But as he started to recover later last year, he approached me again. He said, "Hey, that podcast idea, I'm feeling better. What do you think about that? What would it be?" So we spent time on the phone. We came up with the concept because I asked him, I said, "What's the most popular part of your magazine that your readers love the most?" And he said, "Well, it has to do with collectors, obviously, but also with the car stories themselves." And I said, "Okay, well, how could we devise something around that?" Well, he had a category called buy, sell, hold. They would do that when they do their event talks. They would go to Pebble Beach and different things and talk about buying, selling, holding. And that's where the name came from. So I created the logo that you see for buy, sell, hold. And of course, it had to have an alpha because he's an alpha guy, right? Although he's transitioning, he because his left leg is still very weak, he's had to buy a couple collector cars that are automatics. He bought a 122 Volvo. He just bought a Jaguar XKE Coupe. I think now he's looking at an older BMW. Any rate, we came up with the idea. I already knew how to do this, so my formula of how I approach podcasting, which is very business-like, strict, organized. I mean, I just learned that's how you have to do it. At least it works for me. So I produced the show for us. We co-produced the show, and what we decided was that we will, at first, it's a 1 day a week show. It's Tuesdays, which is when his blog goes out. And we will talk to people who are leaders in the industry, who are auction houses, buyers and sellers of collectible cars. Some very high-end collectors, like coming up soon here is John Shirley, who lives up here in the Northwest, who has some magnificent cars. We've had some amazing people so far on. Bill Warner from Amelia Island, Steven Sirio, who's actually now selling his dealerships. He's moving into a new era with him, with what he's doing and helping people curate collections. Donald Osborne, of course, we all know from Jay Leno's, but
Yep.
Donald's been around forever. So we interview these people, and and we're up to our 8th show, I believe now. We just had the day we're recording the show with you, we had Jacob Greason on, who has I think he works with is it Sotheby's, I believe, and if I messed that up, I apologize. But so it's been a great podcast, and it comes out through the Cars Yeah podcast portal, but you can also find it at Sports Car Market. And of course, I have to throw in a quick plug. We're doing a special right now where you can get a discount if you use BSH on your Sports Car Market magazine subscription. Or
Nice.
if you use Cars Yeah, you can get 50% off a digital subscription. So it's a really great thing. And Keith and I have a good rapport together. We know all the same people. All these guests have already been guests on my podcast. So it's fantastic. So I encourage people to listen to that one too.
I'll tell you what, it's great. And Jay, real quickly, share with Mark and the listeners the Car Collector magazine game that we play.
Yeah, it's one of our favorite pastimes here at SoCal Classic Car Storage. What we do is we go and look at all the auction results in the back of American Car Collector magazine, and we quiz each other, give all the details, and then we got to guess the price. I'm not that good at it, but my dad is always within $10,000, which is pretty good.
Wow. That's the great thing about that American Car Collector and Sports Car Market magazine is you get to see the real true pulse of the car market. And of course, they have their price guide that you can go online through their digital I think their platinum membership program, and you can see, because they're tracking real live prices. It's one thing to kind of guess what things are going to sell for, but when you really see what they've sold for, you can get a real sense of what the market's doing. And of course, we'll see what the fallout will be from this current situation in the world with collector cars, whether it will affect them in a positive way or a negative way. You just don't know, but I love it. It's fun. Yeah. My game that I play is I look at a spread and I go, okay, I can pick one car to have. Which one will it be? And kind of see if my taste changes as I evolve through the magazine.
I got to tell you, I really used to enjoy that game every other month when the magazine would come out. But Jay got smart, so he used to ask me about a Olds 442 or a, like American Muscle or something that was right in my wheelhouse, right? And then he finally he smartened up and he thought, you know what, I'm going to ask him about this 1957 Cadillac, DeVille, one of 200. And so pretty soon I'm getting these cars I'm not familiar with. I don't think I've seen, and I'm off by 50,000. And it is incredibly destroying of your confidence. I want to tell you.
Well, it's funny you say that because in their most recent, the May issue, 1931 Invicta 4.5 liter S-type low chassis sports Scout. Okay, well, first of all,
Okay.
who's ever heard of one of those? I hadn't, and I go, okay, well, and the thing is that all original cars, pretty rough and pretty ratty. And I'm going, okay, I don't know what would run those sell for, maybe 200,000, I don't know, something like that.
Oh, wow.
$1.771 million.
Wow.
Like, yeah, I would have missed that by $1.4 million. So, yeah.
Incredible. Well, okay, I'm not alone then.
No,
That's good.
no. I mean, sometimes we're
Jason likes
shocked.
Jay likes to humiliate me, so it is kind of fun in this father-son business.
Well,
Hey, real
that's okay.
quickly,
Yeah.
real quickly, Mark, you also are, like you mentioned, you're doing a lot of this master of ceremony and keynote speaker at car shows
Yep.
that we've already mentioned. And, so how much fun is that? How'd that come about? I mean, of course, it's all dependent on these shows kicking back up, or maybe they become virtual, but I think it's just a matter of time before we get back in the swing,
Yeah.
hopefully here in the early summer, and get back to what car people do is hang out with each other, tell stories, stretch the truth a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got invited by LeMay, the LeMay family, to come and give a talk to a tour of museum docents and curators and directors that they had. LeMay Museum, of course, here, which is separate from the LeMay family. They used to be all together, but LeMay Museum is a separate museum, and then there's the LeMay family collection. I've known them forever. I met Harold LeMay when I moved up here with Griot's Garage way back 26 years ago, and still know his wife, Nancy. Of course, we lost Harold a while back there, but they invited me to come and give a motivational car related talk. And I'd never done that before. And I went, okay, sounds cool. I mean, any chance to get up in front of public and speak is a good exercise. Scary. Yeah. Will people nod off and fall asleep or be on their phones or not listen? But when I was talking to one of the LeMays, he said, you've talked to so many people, and this was 3 years ago. He said, why don't you because I said, what do you want me to say? And he said, why don't you talk about some of the stories? Because I'm sure you've heard some amazing stories. And that's what formulated my whole talk. So, for instance, the last one I gave was with the local Porsche club at the annual banquet. There was, I think, 350 people or something there. And I modified it to focus on Porsche-related guests. I threw in some other things in there, but again, it talks about people's challenges, their failures, their successes, their stories, heartbreak. I've had some incredible stories from guests that I had no idea where we were going, and they would bring up these stories, and I'd sit there and go, oh my gosh, this is it's amazing, but it's so sad, or it's so so that's what those things. So I ended up getting invited to more of those. I started getting invited to some company functions. APR invited me to come out to Alabama and give a talk. I was there for 4 days talking to their folks. Esoteric invited me last year to do a talk. I got invited last summer to go to the Classic Car Show in Costa Mesa and be the MC.
Yep, we saw you there.
Yeah, celebrity stage.
Had a booth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was really fun. I'd never done anything like that. And they told me at that event, oh, you're only going to have to do over 3 days about 6. I ended up doing like 15 a day. They just kept, got totally, I don't say I was tricked, but they paid me for it. That was nice. But they just kept throwing people, well, why don't you do these guys? Why don't you do, and so all these people kept coming up, and I like to do research on my guests. And some of these people, I didn't know a clue who they were. And I just had to kind of wing it. So we're
going to have to call you Stone Cold Mark Greene going forward. Huh?
Oh, geez. So, I mean, you were there. So hopefully, did I do okay? I mean, you
did great. SoCal's got so much eye candy, if you just focus to the cars and the build, you're safe. But I tell you what, it seems like a natural fit for you. The podcast is a great training ground for the breadth and the diversity of this incredible
Yes.
hobby.
Yeah.
And so, you become, sort of a celebrity as a result. And I think hard work's deserved. But look, you're the only one. Look, I had a friend that I helped start up one of these businesses, and he put together a business plan. And he's like, "Hey, can you send me your business plan?" I'm like, "Sorry, I'd like to, but I just don't have that." So
Yeah.
I think you're so successful because of hard work you put in, and it's a great testimony.
Well,
Mark,
thanks.
unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I want to close, but I want to say thank you for being such an amazing guest and having some really great takes on the SoCal car scene and sharing with you your story, which is so unique and your success. So we can't thank you enough, Mark, and I'm going to turn it over to Jay for some closing comments, but thank you.
Well, thank you. And real quickly before Jay jumps in here, I just want to remind your listeners I've got something for them. So if
Great.
your listeners would like a little something fun, go to carsyeah.com, click on the free book button. I will send you my filler up book, which I love photography. So I created and designed an ebook that's filled with what I call fuel filler fun. They're very cool fueler fill caps. I know that sounds boring, but they're very cool. Of all these cool cars I've shot, interlaced with some very inspirational quotes from my past guests. And of course, I got to be a little bit of a sales guy here. You can find me at carsyeah.com, Facebook at Mark Greene with an E on the end of green, and Cars Yeah on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, Cars Yeah Podcast, Instagram, Cars Yeah Podcast, LinkedIn. There's a little tip for you if you want to increase your business. Use LinkedIn. Incredible resource for businesses. I found so many interesting people through LinkedIn. So check it out. And if you sign up for my free book, you get to be on my list to get free books from my past guests. I've given away this year already, I believe, over about 50 books from some of my past guests. So
That's great.
check me out. Thanks for letting me throw that in there.
Oh, that's great.
No worries, no worries. Well, thank you so much, Mark Greene of the Cars Yeah and the Buy Sell Hold podcast for being on our podcast here. You are now guest number 12, actually.
Cool. Well,
So
that's kind of a
we got a
Porsche
way.
number, 912. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, we got a ways to go before we get to 1500, but we're on our
Yeah.
way, one small step at a
Yep.
time.
Absolutely. Hey, and congratulations, by the way, because podcasting, it's not super hard, but it's not easy too. It takes some effort, let me tell you. So
Yeah.
good for you guys. Yeah, keep it up.
All right, we most certainly will. That'll do it for us here at the SoCal Car Scene podcast. If you like us, you can visit us on our social media page at the SoCal Car Scene, or you can visit for more episodes either on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to the podcast. And also, you can go visit our website at socalcarstorage.com/media. This was a podcast brought to you by SoCal Classic Car Storage in Laguna Hills. If you need some car storage, be sure to check us out. We'd be more than happy to help you out. But anyway, once again, this was Jay Marash, Technical Director and co-host, and you were also listening to Dean Marash, who is the owner of SoCal Classic Car Storage and the main host of this show. So once again, stay healthy out there, stay indoors, and happy driving.
Take care, everybody.